my name's Chaz Ferry. I have a music library called Hollywood Trax, and it is supplying music to Fox Sports and various other things through two different other libraries. Actually, what I really do is I curate for other libraries. There's one library called Manhattan Production Music in New York, and I curate for them. They handle my Hollywood Trax catalog. And then there's a second library called Artist First Music that supplies to Fox Sports, and I curate and I supply music to his library under his own library name. So that I do those two things, plus I master records, mostly for a company called Varese Sarabande Records, which is owned by Concord Music. But then I have some other clients too, and 99% of everything I do is soundtracks of the scores from films. I came out to California because I wanted to be in a band, and my sister was already here in Orange County, and she said I could come and live with her, and she got me a job at Denny's waiting tables. So I lived in Orange County, and I worked at Denny's, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of wandering around Orange County, and one day I saw this recording supply store, and I went in and I bought a little mixing board because I was always fooling around with tape recorders since I was in high school. And when I was at the store, they told me there was a college in Huntington Beach called Golden West that had a recording program. So I went and I signed up and I took the recording program. And I guess the really pivotal moment was when I finished the recording program, one of my classmates called me and said, "Hey, I got a job cleaning the floors at Cherokee Studios in Hollywood. Wow. I can get you a job if you come down." So basically, everything that's ever happened to me my entire life is because my friend Elmer called me and said, "I can get you a job cleaning the toilets at this recording studio." The rest of it all just came from that because I worked at that studio. Cherokee Recording Studios, it was called. It's gone now, but it was a very famous recording studio. A lot of hit records were recorded there. Right. And I worked there for a decade. Wow. Started cleaning the floors and worked my way up. Well, I didn't really know anything then. Just another one of my classmates, my roommate actually, was it my roommate? Yeah, I think it was my roommate. He got a job there, and then he told me you could get a job mixing sound at this place, Cuckoo's Nest, for $20 a night. And so I went there and I got this job. I didn't know anything at all, but it was a lot of really famous punk rock bands from Southern California played there. You probably wouldn't even know most of them, but there were different ones. There was the Circle Jerks and Fear and Black Flag, and Iggy Pop had played there too, and some other different people. So what did I learn from it? You know, when I ended up being able to record at Cherokee later on, I certainly knew how to record a punk rock band because I had mixed every punk rock band. And the funny thing was, a lot of people that had worked at bands that had come through Cherokee, then later on they showed up. I mean, at the Cuckoo's Nest, later on they showed up at Cherokee, and I ended up getting to work with them. Like I worked on the music for the movie Repo Man. It was the first thing that I ever did where they actually let me go in the room and be an assistant rather than cleaning the floors. Mm-hmm. And one of the bands that did a song in the movie was the band Black Flag, and I had mixed their sound at the Cuckoo's Nest, so we kind of knew each other. So yeah, people have to like you.
Yeah,
that's the most important thing. I mean, obviously you have to have the skills, but you have to be really good socially. That's how it works. If people like you, if they want you to be in the room with them all day for like 20 hours, then you'll do okay. But if you're somebody that is not easy to get along with, you probably will not do okay. Well, I don't really produce any music. I just strictly curate the music. I worked for a man named Christopher Franke, and he was in a band called Tangerine Dream, if you've ever heard of them. They're a really famous German electronic band from the 70s. So I ended up working for him after I left Cherokee, and he was doing music for film and television. He was doing Babylon 5 and Walker, Texas Ranger, a lot of TV shows. Later on, and I worked for him for 10 years, and towards the end, there started to be a lot more reality television.
Yeah.
And the guy that had produced Babylon 5 was now producing the TV show Big Brother, and he needed a music library, so he came to Christopher, and Christopher agreed that we would create a music library, which we did for Big Brother. And so that was how I first learned about the music library business. And you know, it's really you just find out what people want. and
Yeah.
you supply what they want. They give you a description. They tell you what it is. They tell you it's this kind of band. You go and you listen to it. You look at it. You have to understand genres, film genres, and musical genres. Metadata is a pretty complex thing, and it's a big learning curve to learn metadata. You know, when I worked at the studio with those big artists around, for the most part, I was anonymous most of the time. Occasionally, I got to work. Like I got to work with David Bowie, and actually, to be honest with you, he wasn't there. I was friends with Hunt and Tony Sales, the Sales brothers. Their father was a famous comedian, Soupy Sales, and they had played with Iggy Pop on the album Lust for Life. They were the bass player and the drummer, and I had a relationship with those guys. I was their engineer whenever they did projects, and then David Bowie started this band Tin Machine, and they became the bass player and the drummer because he had played on Lust for Life. So I just ended up he wanted to re-record one song from their second album, and he was on that. I don't know if you remember this, but he did this gigantic tour called the Serious Moonlight Tour, toured the world for a year, playing like 50,000 seat arenas. Well, he was on the tour at the time, so the guitar player went down to Florida and recorded him singing his vocal parts with just a scratch guitar and a drum machine. And then the band came to Cherokee, and I recorded the band around his vocal track. So I never actually even met him, but I have a credit on that record.
Wow.
Now, what does that have to do with this? You know, I don't know. That part of my life ended. I wanted a little bit more of a not so crazy life. I ended up getting married. I ended up working for Christopher Franke because that was kind of more of a steady day job. And there I learned about music library when we started doing the show, The Big Brother. And then afterwards, I decided I wanted to start my own music library, and didn't really know what I was doing. But a very close friend of ours was the music supervisor on the TV show Access Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I had this studio in the house. He's a very religious man, and he sings in the church choir. And I used to record their church choir at the house for free, just because he was a good friend. And one day he just said, "Do you want to create a music library for Access Hollywood?" Yeah. So I was doing somebody a favor, and then I had to learn how to. I had to learn all that end of things, which I knew a lot about from working for Christopher already. You know, I had to learn about the metadata. I used an organization called Taxi to get the music.
Yeah, yeah.
That was how I first got the music. I don't know if that explains it, but that's kind of the story.
Okay.
First of all, Sheryl Crow and Tom Petty were never around.
Yeah.
It was film music. The Tom Petty track, and this is we can just talk about credits for a minute here. Okay. I have these; they're great credits. This backstory is maybe not as exciting, but I have the credits, right?
Right.
Tom Petty had supplied us a song to a film. The company I worked for secured the rights to release the soundtrack of the film like 15 years later. We got a master file from the record company. I mastered it, put it in the soundtrack. I never spoke to the man. Now, Sheryl Crow, that was a little different. It was a movie called A Boy Named Poe. And Burt Bacharach, super famous composer, wrote like dozens and dozens of huge hit songs in the 60s and 70s. He had an autistic child, and he had heard about this documentary, and he wanted to score the music for it. So he scored the music for it, and then he got Sheryl Crow to write the theme song for the movie. So the company I worked for got the rights. I got the master from Sheryl Crow. I mastered it, sent her back a reference copy via, WeTransfer. She emailed me back, said, "Sounds great." Well, it was done. It was in the soundtrack. And as far as how I approach mastering, that's a long story there. Mastering originally was when someone wanted to make a vinyl record in 1958. Somebody had to know how to take that from the tape and put it onto a lacquer so they could make the vinyl. It was a technical skill. And there was a lot of rules. If it was too loud, it would be distorted. There was lots and lots of rules. You had to know what you were doing. Then when CDs came out, originally it was done on these big giant tape machines, and you had to have a lot of technical knowledge to be able to prep it to make a CD. Now you or me or anybody else can burn a CD, or mostly it just goes on streaming. The honest truth is mastering is kind of not necessarily necessary anymore. You don't have to know that much. But the bottom line for me is people that master, for the most part, modern music, it sounds terrible because they just think they have to do stuff to it. And I don't do stuff. I do very little. I do as little as possible. And especially with soundtracks, a lot of times I do nothing.
Oh.
Which makes me different than a lot of other people. There's some rules. You have to understand some things about how loud things can be on the streaming services. And all the streaming services, they do something called loudness normalization, where they automatically turn things up and down.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand that. There's some things you have to understand, but it's not, you know, like you hear mastering engineers talk about, people talk about the magic. That's all bullshit. It's not. It's some technical things you have to know.
Yeah.
And I do as little as possible because I'm so tired of hearing mastering engineers ruin so many recordings by overdoing it, too much compression, making them too loud. I hate that.
Gotcha.
So there you go.
Okay.
First of all, I am assigned these projects. It's not like I picked them. I've mastered 600 plus soundtracks.
Wow.
It started when I worked for Christopher Franke. He had released a little CD of music from the TV show Babylon 5, and it sold 25,000 copies. Right. So he decided to start a record company. So he started a record company that was releasing soundtracks and you know, kind of new age music and stuff like that. And someone needed to master the CDs, and so I learned how to do it. And it was very early on when they just were first making where you could burn your own CD at home. So we bought software, and I learned how to burn the CDs, and we started sending them. And the first few, I made some mistakes. I learned a little bit more, but basically, somebody that worked there, I left, and that person left, and he started his own soundtrack label, and then he asked me to master his records. And then later on, one of his buddies worked at Varese Sarabande, which was a big label, and asked me if I wanted to master for them. So I started mastering for them, and I have a person that I worked with for years. His name is Kerry Mansfield. He's produced tons and tons and tons and tons of soundtracks, and we just did them together. He handles all the securing the rights and stuff like that, and then we jointly figure out how to find the masters. Who has them? Usually the film company has them. Sometimes we have to go back to the composers. And then we get the files. I do the mastering. I make a lot of notes. And we send a reference to the composers or whoever controls the master to get feedback. Either they say it's okay or they say they want things changed. When it's all completely the way they want it, then we send it off to the plant and they make the CDs. She's been writing music and been a singer for like 30 years. As a matter of fact, we met in a recording studio. That's how we even met in the first place. Then she ended up becoming a college professor, and she's been teaching for like 30 years. We've recorded music along the way. We had this weird side band that we put together called Arrested Amnesia, which is kind of electronic meets Middle Eastern music, and we put that out, and she put things out. And now she's going to retire. She just wants to record music, and so because I have the library, and I've learned a lot about making money on streaming, there's a lot of focus on building an audience for her songs right now, and we're working with different producers and making new songs, and we're releasing them as singles. And I'm learning tons and tons about how to promote for digital, and I'm learning more about how to get songs placed in film specifically for her. It's a lot of work, and I learned some whole new skill sets I didn't have before, so that's been good. It's all about relationships. I mean, you have to have skills. You have to learn the skills, obviously, but it's all about relationships. It's about who you know and who introduced you to who. That's really it. No, I don't think so. I'll tell you why. Because the most important thing is my marriage to my wife, Jenny. And the path I took was the path I had to take to find her. Therefore, I would not change anything, because I might not have found her if something had been different.